Good morning, friends. This is Pastor Lori coming to join you this morning from First UMC in Kirksville. I'm down in our library today as I think about our question, how is it with your soul? Now, I don't know if you're anything about like me, but it's a good thing I'm not staring at the books behind me because when I'm in a library or I have a bookshelf, I want to read the titles because each of those books is unique. Each one is different. Some are ones I've probably read before, others I haven't. And they all go together in lovely ways with different perspectives, different outlooks, different ways of approaching subjects, fiction and nonfiction, mysteries, and just comfortable reads, books that ask many questions and sometimes ones that provide answers. So I'm here with you in the library today, and I got books with me because I'm prepping for our fall study on First Corinthians. And as we meet on Fridays, we ask that question, how is it with my soul? And for me, sometimes a way of feeding my soul is through books. Has been since I was very young. I always had a book in my hand. And there have been times in the past few months where life has gotten so busy, I really haven't had much time to pause and dive into a book. So my preparation this week for our study has been good to feed my soul through just spending some time in the words of Scripture and the words of others who are reflecting on this Scripture. And I just wanted to share a little bit about that with you this morning. You might be interested in joining us for this study. If you are, it will meet on Sunday mornings at 11 a.m. after worship down in room 202, which is past the church office down by the nursery. It's helpful if you sign up ahead of time by letting us know, but you certainly don't have to. You can certainly just show up on Sunday. And even if you can't make every single session, we still invite you to come and join us when you can. You might know First Corinthians, maybe best for its passage in chapter 13 about love. And I read a slightly different translation of that this week. One of the other new books I have is a First Nations version of the New Testament. It's a translation compiled by a team of folks from all sorts of native tribes, both from the U.S. and Canada, the folks who were on this land long before any of us who have heritage from other places were. And it's their attempt at making a thought-for-thought translation that uses language that the first people of this North American continent, they call it Turtle Island, many tribes do, would have been using in ways that fit how they would have been able to understand it best. And I liked a little piece of this from 1 Corinthians 13. This is the one we all know that begins, love is patient and kind. Love is never jealous. It does not brag or boast. It's not puffed up or big-headed. Love does not act in shameful ways, nor does it care only about itself. It is not hot-headed, nor does it keep track of wrongs done to it. Love is not happy with lies and injustice, but truth makes its heart glad. Love keeps walking even when carrying a heavy load. Love keeps trusting, never loses hope, and stands firm in hard times. The road of love has no end. And that is one of the thoughts that we keep in mind as we're diving into this letter, that First Corinthians, which began not as a book of scripture, but it began as a letter from the Apostle Paul to the church in the city of Corinth. Now, Paul himself was a sort of unlikely source to be writing these letters. He had actually been a persecutor of Christians, and he had an experience on the road one day as he was traveling to Damascus that turned him into a follower of Jesus, as opposed to a persecutor of Jesus's followers. So he brings an interesting background and perspective to his letters. He touches on all sorts of subjects because all of these new faith communities were trying to learn how to figure out what does it mean to be a follower of Jesus in a time where Jesus is no longer walking with us. What does it mean as we're bringing in people from different faith backgrounds, both those who'd been raised Jewish, those who maybe had followed the worship patterns of worshiping other gods and goddesses, other deities, and maybe a few who really hadn't had much of a faith background at all. And they're trying to learn how to live together in community. And as they do, they run into issues that were arising. And as the author of this study says, name a subject about participating in community that doesn't come up in 1 Corinthians. Factions, sexual ethics, gender issues, money issues, class hierarchies, theological questions, how to conduct worship, leadership questions. What does it mean about what happens after death? Paul touches on all of those in this letter. So it's a wide-ranging book of scripture. And many of the issues that they're dealing with are still things that in some way, shape, or form we're dealing with today, because humans are humans, no matter what time or place we live in. So Paul struggles with their questions. He struggles with what he knows about God. He wrestles with it. He tries to give advice and wisdom in a way that they might be able to understand. And asking, where's God in the midst of all this? How does Jesus tend to us, challenge us, save us through it? How can we discern our own spiritual gifts and God-given purpose in this life? And all of those kind of things show up in this letter. Because just like us today, the folks then all brought something a little different to the table. Like this library where every book is just a little different, even the ones that are part of a series, they weren't exactly alike. And we're not exactly alike. We know that's the case. And so we all come in to this wonderful walk, this wonderful road of faith. And we learn how to live together in community. We learn how to not try to be just like the person that we know best, but to be ourselves as a follower of Jesus. Not to follow Jesus exactly in the same way as somebody else does, but to do that as who we are. We embrace our gifts and our stories as they relate to the work of God, defined by love. And so this is this wonderful endeavor. And our personal stories are an important part of what it means to live out God's kingdom here on this earth, God's way of life, God's great road. And so this book of 1 Corinthians is going to go into that some. And we'll look at how the questions that they dealt with, those might not be exactly the same questions we're asking. But we do have ones that are probably similar, and that the wisdom that Paul imparts to them may have some wisdom for us as well. Because one of the things that shows up over and over in Paul's letters is he's had to come to terms with his own story. He's had to wrestle with the fact that he used to persecute the followers, and now he's one of them. And he doesn't make excuses for that. He also doesn't, he's not proud of it by any means. It's part of his story, though. And so the way he embraces what the gospel means, what it means to be a follower of Christ, is colored by his experiences. Just like for all of us, our stories are impacted by what we've been through. He allows his story to be part of his own way of relating to others, both those like him and those who are not like him. And one of the challenges for us is to do the same. Not to be overly self-critical, also not to puff ourselves up, but to simply, with honesty, acknowledge who we are now, who we've been, and to see and go to God in prayer as to how all of that is part of the story of God at work in this world. How being a follower of Jesus plays out specifically through us. And each of us has a way that we can connect both to God and with others because of who we are, because of what we've been through. And that's important. We need that in this world. And so whatever your story is, it's important. It's needed. And your view on the world, your view on what it means to follow Jesus, your view on what it means to be a part of community, that is all part of this great table that Jesus sets for us. So, friends, as we go into this weekend ahead, I hope that we'll see some of you on Sunday. Over these next 6 weeks, it's a 6-week study, I will be sharing some of the pieces here on Fridays from this study. So even if you can't make it in on Sundays, you might want to read through the book of 1 Corinthians along with me, and we'll touch on some pieces here. May you go in peace. May you go in the knowledge that your story is very important because of the connect. It's made you who you are, and it gives you ways to connect to others that we so desperately need. So friends, go in peace, go in faith, go in hope, go as 1 Corinthians would lead us in love, the most important of all. Take care, friends, and I'll see you soon.